sure that we start recording. Very good, so that you guys can get the recording. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for this presentation. Let me know if you can see my screen. That is helpful to me. All right, so inventory strategies for restock limits and supply chain chaos. What are those things that you need to know about restock limits? And how should you be managing your inventory coming into the new year so that the things that may have occurred in terms of your supply chain, logistics, inventory, and keeping in stock, those things don't occur again, and that you have a more smooth 2022. All right, so first, a little bit about me. If you do not know about me, I've been selling on Amazon since 2014, and about 3 years ago, I recognized that inventory was a big part of my problem. I was having margin crunch, or profit erosion, as you like to say, and I wanted to get some of my money back. And I found that stock outs and overstocking and fees around inventory was a problem. So 3 years ago, I really immersed myself in inventory. Since then, I've spoken to hundreds of 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers and written over 50 articles on inventory and supply chain management. Been on dozens of podcasts. We have over 1,000 users now with my inventory management tool, Stocked, which is a tool that I'm the co-founder of and built out over the last few years. And the tool is now backed by top masterminds, influencers, agencies, and aggregators. All right, so let's go ahead and get going. First of all, as a little bit of a gift for staying to the end, I'm going to be giving you a couple of things. First of all, a DIY spreadsheet. So if you are not currently using Stocked or another system that you love, this DIY spreadsheet will be a good kind of gateway into getting better inventory management. It has a lot of the best practices. It can't be nearly as granular as a software can, but it does have a lot of best practices that I talk about built right into the spreadsheet. Then we have an inventory-minded marketing planner. I'll get more into inventory-minded marketing, but essentially that's a planner that helps you to get the plan from your marketing team to be able to give it to your inventory team so that they can then plan out inventory using marketing as using the marketing blueprint so that marketing doesn't cause inventory to stock out. And then there's the inventory workflow checklist, which also helps with getting your inventory, your marketing, and also your accounting teams together, as it's a complete and kind of whole picture. And then SOPs for inventory, basically across your entire business. The first thing I want to talk about is just really to get into the crux of what inventory management is. There's a lot of moving parts, and it can seem very complex, but I like to take complex ideas and find a way to make them easier to understand. And really, inventory management is only a couple of things. I call them the 3 pillars of inventory management. There's how much you really just want to know, how much inventory do I need to order or to transfer? And then by when do I need to do that? What is that drop dead date that I need to do that for? And then how is it going to get there, right? Once we know how much and by when, what's the best way to get it there, the one that's going to get it there fastest and for the least amount of money? So let's go through. The first one is how much. Let's talk about how much, the calculations, right? There's calculations, there's tracking, and then there's logistics. So I like to say that numbers don't lie, or do they? So there's a way that numbers can lie to you. If your formula is wrong, then you don't have the correct picture. If you get your basic calculations wrong, and it's a very common thing that is done, not just in spreadsheets, but also in some software systems that I've seen, getting those numbers wrong means that your entire order is wrong. And the larger your order, the more detrimental. So as you scale up, this becomes more and more important. And also as the lead times expand, as we're seeing, it used to take 60 days to get inventory from China to the US. Now it's taking 90, 120, and so on, right? The longer the lead time also, the larger the orders. And so the more important it is to get your numbers right, that basic calculation right. So first and foremost, the basic calculation that everything is based on is your sales velocity. And we call what we use daily adjusted velocity. And it's called adjusted for a reason. It's one of the things that I used to do. One of the things that was common to do is just looking at last year's sales or looking at last month's sales, last couple of months' sales, and not really, and just saying, okay, I sold 10,000 units. I'm going to buy another 10,000 units. Well, that isn't always accurate. If there's stuff that happened within that 10,000 units, that is not going to happen again, then you're going to get yourself into trouble. So the things that you need to adjust the velocity to fit, you need to actually find your daily average. What's your daily average sales? You know, usually, oh, I sell 100 units a day. If you usually sell 100 units a day, and then all of a sudden you have this crazy spike, right? You have a sales spike that goes crazy. You have Martha Stewart mentions you on her, her giftable items during, say, the holiday season or something. You have this huge spike. Well, you can't expect that Martha Stewart's going to mention you every year on her giftables list. So that in itself is something that you need to adjust for. So sales spikes need to be adjusted for. Stockouts, which we're all facing, stockouts need to be adjusted for as well. And the issue with stockouts is that there's actually a certain way to adjust. You can't just say, I had 0 sales. That's only part of the picture. And we're going to talk a little bit about that stockout calculation. It's a big reason why, even before the restock limits, it was a big reason why people were under ordering and stocking out. So we'll get into that. And then deep discounts, being able to filter out deep discounts if you're not going to continue to run those deep discount sales. If you run, for example, a lightning deal and you run that every single month consistently, then that's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about those deep discounts that you're not going to continue. And then once you have that foundation, that daily adjusted velocity, then you can do things like start layering growth trends in. So if you've got a product that is growing at 2% per month, you can add 2% per month for an extended period of time if you plan to continue to grow at that rate. So basically, just consider daily adjusted velocity as your true velocity. It's your true velocity, removing all the anomalies that will not be repeating themselves. All right, so let's do a quick case study. So I did mention this idea of if you get your stockout calculation wrong, what can happen? So this is a study from a seller, a 7-figure seller in the wholesale space, who came to SoStock and started trying out SoStock and was comparing it to a software that he had been using for years. The problem with the software is that it had constantly caused him to stock out. So the software, he stopped trusting it, and he had a software for some of his slower sellers, but his best sellers that were most important to his business, that 80-20 rule, his best sellers, he calculated in his own spreadsheet so that he could ensure that he didn't stock out. However, he was still stocking out with the spreadsheet. So neither the software or the spreadsheet that he was using were working. So he came into SoStock, and SoStock was predicting that his daily adjusted velocity was much higher than he thought. We're going to walk through exactly what happened and why it was higher than he actually thought. So here's a study of what actually was going on. The competing software was saying, based on its calculation, that he was selling 8 units a day. His custom spreadsheet, which was a little bit more detailed, said he was selling 10 units a day. When he plugged into SoStock, we said it was 15 units a day, and he wanted to find out why this was. We actually got on a call and talked about it. But if he had followed, if the true velocity was 15 units a day, and he had followed this advice, he would have stocked out on day 4. Based on the competing software and the custom spreadsheet, he would have stocked out on day 5. In the case of SoStock, he was no longer stocking out. this is happening because there are two different things that you have to ask when you have a stock out, right? When you have a stock out, there are a couple of different questions. You have one, did you have stock? If you didn't have stock at all, you obviously can't sell inventory that doesn't exist, right? We're not talking about pre-sales. Not a lot of people do pre-sales on Amazon. It's very risky. So let's just kind of throw that out. On Amazon, do you have stock at FBA or not? And this is data that can be pulled historically from the API for the past 2 years, right? You can do an API pull on this. If you're not using an API, this is something that you want to track in something I call a stock out log. And the DIY spreadsheet that I'm going to send you guys does have a stock out log. We won't get into the details of how that works. I have a video training on that if you're going to be looking at that spreadsheet. The second thing that you want to identify is, was there an unusual interruption to your normal sales velocity? So this means this can include things like lower sales days right before a stock out. So usually you'll have a 0, 0, 0, but right before that, you're used to selling 100, you end up selling 25, and that should not be considered in your average, right? That should be considered a stock out day because it is so much lower. And if you're looking at averages, you're looking at a 30-day average worth of sales, that's going to majorly impact your daily velocity because you're not adjusting it. Then you have a lower sales day when you come back in stock. Then there's these times where Amazon finds 1 unit during a stock out, and they say 1 unit, and then if that unit is counted as a full sales day, that's a problem. And then finally, sales interrupted by listing suspension. So if your listing is suspended, that's a problem too. Listing suspensions should count as stock outs, even if you have inventory. So all of these factors, if they're not being included in your stock out calculation, you're really going to have a hard time being able to get the correct daily adjusted velocity. And like we said, that is the number that if you don't get that number right, it's going to multiply that error across every single day that you're placing an order. So if you're placing a 90-day order, then that is going to multiply for 90 days and you're going to have a real hard time. All right, let's look at why this happens, what actually is being done. So going back to our friend who was consistently stocking out, what was the software doing? It was actually calculating, only looking for number one. You know, did you have stock, right? Did you have stock? Did you have sales? And it wasn't looking at the other portions of this. So if we look at the details, we look at, we're selling on average 100 units a day. And then we have a day where we do 23 units, then 0, and 1, 0, 0, and then 13 when we come back in stock. Well, the competing software doesn't look at this as a stock out. It looks at it as an in-stock day. And we would look at it as a stock out day because it is less than what you're used to selling. And you can control that range inside of SoStuff. You can actually control that range. We default it to 30%, but maybe it's 25% for you, or maybe it's 20% or 50%. You're able to control what that range is, where if I have 100 units a day and I sell, you know, only 30% of that, for example, then that's going to be a stock out for my business. So we count those as a stock out. And the difference is this. We, in a 30-day period, if we're looking at 30-day averages, when we're placing our orders, we're saying that there are only 23 in-stock days out of that 30. And they're saying there are 26. So we would get the 100 as the daily adjusted velocity. And this erroneous calculation would only get 90. So if you're ordering 90 days worth of inventory, you're going to be short a lot of units, right? You're missing 10 units a day. So that's almost 1,000 units that you're going to be short when you place your order. And that's something that you can't really risk, especially in a time where everything is more expensive to ship and everything takes longer. You need to be a lot more accurate now that we don't have kind of this leeway for getting inventory into Amazon very quickly. All right, so let's talk about the number one mistake that sellers make. So the number one mistake sellers make, and this is before restock limits, this is something I recognized when I talked to sellers. Like I said, I talked to hundreds of sellers. I also have a copywriting agency where we would do promotional emails for people. And these are patterns that I would see a lot of sellers make. And that is marketing inside of a vacuum. We're built in a way that we're marketing focused, right? It's just what we are. We're marketers, we're inventory marketers, and it's always marketing first and operations kind of second or never, right? We don't really think about it until we have to think about it. And so if we're not looking at the whole picture, we're not looking at the marketing side and the inventory side and how our marketing affects our inventory, we're going to have a problem. Marketing and inventory need to be coordinated. And this is something that's very, very common. It's common in solopreneurship. It's common in, larger teams where they have a VA for this and a VA for that. It's also common in husband and wife teams. So it's this lack of coordination. It's just because you don't have the systems to be able to coordinate. You go to an event, you find out there's this really great hack that could double your sales, a PPC hack, a conversion hack, whatever it is, but you don't vet it against the inventory. And so you need to start vetting against the inventory. You have this plan. You put the plan down, you compare it to what you have in terms of inventory so that you don't stock out. I actually had a client who ran a Mother's Day sale, and then by the time Father's Day the next month came around, he was stocking out. Well, he'd given a 20% discount coupon code for his Mother's Day sale. He could have just not done that sale and continued to stay in stock and last throughout both of those time periods rather than stocking out. And it costs a lot of money, not just restock limits, or not just, your restock limits will be affected, but not just restocking and re-ranking and air shipments, but also the money that you waste on ads, on coupon codes, on all of the activities that led you to a stock out. If you actually marketed yourself into a stock out, those marketing costs are not necessary to have been lost. So you have marketing that's injuring your inventory as well. So something to keep in mind, you can't market inside of a vacuum, and you especially can't market inside of a vacuum nowadays, right? It used to be that we could focus on our best sellers. Now we have to market across our entire catalog, because we can't market our best sellers if we can't get our best sellers into Amazon. And we're unable to get our best sellers into Amazon if we're not moving out stale inventory that's not turning. So we need to have marketing and inventory working together, not just marketing telling inventory what their plans are, but inventory telling marketing, hey, here's some data points that you need to know about inventory so that it doesn't create a problem, so that we have inventory that's not moving and you're not paying attention. We can no longer pay attention only to revenue. We also have to pay attention to inventory turnover. All right, so here's a couple of things to do to be able to do that. One is the first and foremost, the marketing plan needs to be sent to inventory to be able to vet out before you execute on that plan. And that is where the inventory minded marketing planner, like I mentioned, that you guys are going to be getting, that's where this comes into play, the inventory minded marketing planner. So it does a couple of things. It helps you to calculate what type of velocity you want to use, right? Based on your own experience and what works for your business, whether it's last year's sales or, a 30, 60 or 90 day sales average, whatever that is. And then there's trends. If you want to look at a trend, add a trend, or add growth. If you want to do a campaign that, let's say you think that PPC campaign is going to increase sales on particular SKUs for by 10%, you can add 10% growth, and they can use that data to calculate inventory demand. And then if you have lightning deals or any other sales events, what is the time period? What's the date range for that? And then how many total units do you expect to move? And finally, seasonal sales spike. So this would be a percentage increase or a percentage decrease within a certain range. If you do really well during summer, or if you have, winter product or back to school product, that type of thing. All right, so the next thing is the data that inventory should be giving to the marketing team. Inventory, the team has to take responsibility for this relationship as well. The first report should be what's called a stockout risk report. So a stockout risk report is something that indicates the next stockout day. So which SKUs are at risk of stocking out, how many days will they be stocked out, what's the date that we plan on them potentially being stocked out, and then also a little history about how many times have we stocked out of this product. That history is actually really valuable to the inventory team because they can identify that if we've been stocked out of specific SKUs or SKUs from specific suppliers, there's something wrong with our supply chain. There's something that we're not doing and our systems are broken. And so as we improve those things, the metrics should improve as well. So we can see, okay, it used to be, 100 days were out of 365 days of the year, we were stocked out. Now it's decreasing and it was only 50 days. So that is something that's very valuable for both teams. If you don't have a way of doing this, here's a quick calculation. You take your total inventory and then your daily adjusted velocity, and you divide your daily adjusted velocity into your total inventory, and that will give you the days of remaining stock, right? So that's your basic calculation. So this stockout risk report tells marketing, when marketing receives this, they know that they need to potentially change up their ad strategy so that they don't stock out this product. So whether that's, turning off ads that are not performing well, or that's, kind of not going into doing an ad campaign. Maybe they had decided they were going to do an ad campaign and include those SKUs. They can decide not to include those SKUs until you restock. All right, next point would be a slow sellers report. And the next three that I'm going to mention, they're going to sound very similar, but I'm going to explain the differences and also explain how a marketing team would use those reports. So the slow sellers report, this would be something that selects a minimum and a maximum range, right? It's going to show your daily adjusted velocity, how many days of FBA stock you have, and then your total days of supply, right? How many days left you have. So you would pick a range, a minimum and a maximum. The maximum would be the amount that it takes to create a basically viable product. So that might be every product that I sell needs to be 20 sales a day or more. If it's less than 20 sales a day, then I figure that this is not a good product for my business. And then it will have a minimum, and that minimum would be 5, it's maybe say 5 sales a day. There's products that would be lower than that, which would go in our next report, which is the liquidation report. But this is a slow seller report where we think we can still revive this product. I call it the move it or lose it SKUs, right? It either needs to increase in sales or it's going to become dead weight to us. So what you would want to do is you would want to have the marketing team use this report to know which products they need to start ramping up sales for. Because what's going to happen is that if the sales continue to dwindle, the inventory sitting at FBA will start to clog your system. And you have the days left in FBA in your report so that the marketing team knows how much inventory they actually have to play with to be able to boost sales. So if they're going to do a flash sale on this product, they need to know how much runway they have, right? And then there's like I mentioned, the liquidation report. The liquidation report only has a minimum. So this would be anything under 5 units a day, for example. And it's going to have the same data that the other report has. But what this is for is you don't plan on restocking this. You need to sell through this product and remove it from FBA as fast as possible. So the marketing team will use this to know that they need to move that inventory. They need to devise a plan to move it before it starts blocking their best sellers from FBA. And it doesn't necessarily mean, when I say liquidation report, it doesn't necessarily mean to remove it and send it to a liquidator or to do Amazon's FBA liquidation program, because those don't contribute to your restock limits. It would be better to boost your restock limits by selling them, even if you have to drop the price a whole lot. It's better to sell it if you have the time. It's better to sell it through Amazon's platform than not to, because that way, even if you're selling at FBM, and we'll get into FBM in a little bit, but it's better to do that than not to do that, because it helps with your restock limits. And then lastly, Overstock Report. So there are oftentimes slow sellers and liquidation products on this list, but you also may have some best sellers on this list too. And this is inventory that is being held at FBA that you have more of. Let's say you do, in this example, 90 days worth of stock or more. I would even say 60 days at this point, just based on restock limits. But what you want to do is you want to clear that inventory out, and you want to be able to do that in such a way where you can boost fees by and increase rankings, right? By using that excess inventory. That excess inventory can be an asset or a liability. It's a liability if it just sits there and it's collecting a bunch of fees. If it becomes an asset if you're able to use it to boost your restock limits or to boost your sales ranking and revive products that maybe are a little slower, or products that you want to be more competitive with. So this is where you start to realize understanding inventory and how to utilize inventory, how that can be a resource, a very good resource for the marketing team. All right, let's get into tracking. So tracking, remember we said, by when. We can't figure out by when to send our inventory, right? We can't figure out that date unless we know where our inventory is at, how much we have, and also what's coming in, right? What's in production, what's en route, and what's coming into FBA. So you need to be able to track in order to have a complete picture of when you need to place your orders and your transfers. Where is my stuff is a question that we were getting a lot. It's actually interesting, not just forecasting, being able to forecast, but also being able to see where people's stuff is, what visibility is there. So you need to have visibility and understanding where all of your inventory is. So there's a few ways we can look at it. I'm going to share a couple of dashboards, but this will just give you an idea. If you're not using SoStock, this will just give you an idea of how you can use tools to be able to track things. So one is an order tracker. This is a Kanban view, so kind of like a Trello board, and it gives you what's in production, what's en route, what's coming into your third-party warehouse, and what's coming into FBA, right? It shows you the ETA, it shows you how much that PO costs you, when is it leaving production, when is it arriving, and where is it going, and by how. In the en route section, it's by how. Is it going by boat? Is it going by air? Is it going by ground? And so that's the order tracker. Then you have the inventory on hand. This is a complete view of all of your inventory. Where is it? So here's all of the warehouses, which warehouses have how much, and what is the total quantity that is available. And you can also divide this into by marketplace, right? What is the inventory that I have for, the UK versus the EU versus the US, et cetera. Then we have inbound shipments. This is just a list of all of the shipments that you have that are currently in process. So whether they're a PO in production or they're on a boat, this is everything that is inbound that hasn't yet arrived at the final destination. Then there's the warehouse levels. Looking at a view of each warehouse, what does it contain? And then orders within the next 30 days. You need to know what orders you're placing within the next 30 days. And that becomes very important so that you don't miss those deadlines. All right, we got a quick question here. Does the order tracker include AGL shipments? AGL is Amazon Global Logistics. So it's based, it doesn't pull data from Amazon. Amazon doesn't give us all the data, but what you can use it for is you set the lead times. So if you're setting the lead times, then you can always, you would basically set, it's in production for 30 days, it ships and it'll be 45 days on the ocean, and then it should arrive ground freight for 10 days, whatever it is, and then checking in for another 5 days or 8 days or something like that. So you set the lead time and it'll move based on your lead time. And as you get updates from AGL, you can go in and adjust the lead time. So if it's taking a bit longer and you have to add another 5 days, an estimated 5 days, you can adjust that and see what's going to happen and whether you need to slow down sales because it's not going to arrive on time, and that sort of thing. So unfortunately, Amazon doesn't give us all that data. We will be working other tracking information into SoStock later on, but that's just a general idea of how SoStock works, but also how you would be able to adjust your Kanban view would be just to track it yourself. Good question. All right, so let's talk about the reorder point. How do we figure out when we have to reorder? What is that comprised of? And it's really two things. It's your buffer stock, how much extra stock you want to have available as a backup, and then your lead time. How long does it actually take to get inventory into Amazon from the point you order it? And that'll give you your reorder point. And it's actually, let's talk about buffer stock. Let's talk about buffer stock and then a little about lead time. And then we'll see how that calculation works out. So buffer stock is the way to figure out what your buffer stock is the longer the lead time or the transfer time, the higher the buffer stock you're going to want. And that's because you want to protect your business against all the things that could potentially go wrong. So as COVID started happening, lead times that used to be 60 days, people started having to increase their lead times. So when they increased their lead times, they also increased their buffer stock, because all of these things that are going wrong, if you have more excess inventory, you would be able to avoid some of the stock outs if you had extra buffer stock. Buffer stock, I would recommend to calculate this in days rather than in units. A lot of people calculate in units and they'll say, I have 200 units of buffer stock, and everything's always going to turn into units. But if you're calculating in days, it's basically saying, okay, 30 days worth of inventory. When your sales velocity changes, because we know that, let's say we sell more during the Christmas holiday than we sell during our off season or our non-holiday season, we want the number of units to fluctuate to be able to last based on how much velocity is moving for that particular period of time. So doing buffer stock in days becomes very important. Then you want to have a buffer stock in your FBA, but also a buffer stock in your warehouse. And lastly, Amazon has something called a geo ranking algorithm, which means you don't want to run too slim. You don't want to have 5 days of buffer stock at FBA if you can help it. And that's because when Amazon disperses your inventory across the country, and they have this 2-day prime, right? They want to deliver 2-day prime. They're not really hitting that mark nowadays, but you have this 2-day prime, and Amazon, when it sees that you don't have enough inventory, maybe you have some in California, you have some in New York and Florida, but the middle of the country doesn't have a lot going for it. When you don't have that inventory that can get there in 2 days, they start lowering your ranking in those areas. So they're geographically lowering your ranking. You might be living in California and you're checking California and your ranking is, say position 3, but you might be, position 6 or 7 in an area where you're not carrying a lot of inventory, right? There's not a lot of inventory available. They'll do this also with your PPC. So they may not award you the ad space for particular areas as well. So your sales can start to diminish if you keep too little buffer stock. A good rule of thumb is usually standardly like a 30-day buffer stock is pretty decent, but FBA check-in times have been very slow. So people would like to have more than 30 days. And at the same time, restock limits kind of conflict with that. So try to find your sweet spot for your business based on what your restock limits are. But a good rule of thumb is trying to keep at least 30 days worth of buffer stock. All right, I'm going to start speeding through a little bit because I want to be conscious of your guys' time and we have a lot to cover. But do pop something in the chat if you have a question or if I'm going too fast. Lead times and transfer times. All I'm going to say about this is be in constant communication with your suppliers, your freight forwarders, your warehouses to make sure that your lead times are correct. Because if they're experiencing shortages or they are experiencing power outages like they're experiencing right now, they have power curbing when they're not allowed to use power at all times. Some of them are only able to produce 4 days out of the week, for example. They're not allowed to use power outside of that. You need to find out what's the current lead time. How long does it take to produce? How long is shipping taking? How long is, ground freight taking, so that I can adjust my lead times appropriately. So make sure to do that. So here's an example. Here's an example of how you use these 2 points to calculate your reorder point. 30-day buffer stock, right? And then you say, let's say, for example, you have a 90-day lead time. You add those numbers together and you really have to reorder 90 days before you stock out. So if you know the date that you're going to stock out, then you can back that up 90 days to find out your drop dead reorder point. You must reorder by this point to be safe, right? So one of the ways, it's actually my favorite feature in SoStocked. One of the ways that I recommend figuring out your stock out date is something called an inventory timeline. It gives every single day a tracking of your daily velocity, your daily burn rate, including your FBA inventory, as well as your warehouse inventory. You can then figure out what your stock out date is, right? This can be done on a spreadsheet as well. So you can figure out what your stock out date is going to be if you have an inventory timeline. And then if you know your reorder point, just back that up to 90 days or whatever it is. All right, here's a quick case study. So we had someone who was air shipping a lot. They were doing a lot of air shipping, and it was because they weren't tracking things as well as they should, and they didn't have their systems in place, right? They didn't have tracking and they didn't have alerts to be able to notify them when their reorder point was. So they were paying for expensive air shipments a lot, and the cost was actually pretty nuts. And so they started using SoStocked, and they started being able to do a lot more sea shipments, a lot less air shipments. And the rates for shipping per unit went for them from $1.20 per unit to only 45 cents per unit. The huge savings, about 63% reduction in shipping cost. And if you looked at the entire business, you extended that across the entire business, was $150,000 in savings just simply by having a better strategy to track inventory, to be able to get inventory onto the boat on time. So it can be very, very valuable to set tracking and to set accurate information, lead times and buffer stock, and avoid air shipments all the time. All right, let's get into logistics. I want to talk about this third pillar, how to send your stuff. The elephant in the room, of course, is restock limits, right? Restock limits is the thing that everyone seems to be bashing their head against the wall about. And there's no magic pill, right? But there are things that you can know that can help you to navigate restock limits, to improve your conditions, and to start to avoid stockouts. So first of all, Amazon never intended to be a storage facility. It always intended to be a distribution center. So it was trying to get back to that. So if we're wondering why did they do this restock limits? Why did this come in play? They, for the longest time, kind of let us run free with our inventory, and that started to become very, very detrimental to them. So they're shifting back to what they originally intended. Okay, sell-through rate. So sell-through rate is the #1 factor for Amazon to calculate how well you're doing with inventory. And it's actually, when you look at the inventory performance index, it's made up of 4 points, but every single one of those points points to sell-through. You've got sell-through, you've got in-stock rate, you've got stranded inventory, and you've got excess inventory. All of those will be improved if you just improve sell-through. I'm going to talk to you about the definition of sell-through, and you can start to see why those 4 factors basically are pointing to the same metric. So the sell-through, this is actually Amazon's definition of sell-through. And that is your FBA rolling 90-day sell-through rate is the number of your units sold and shipped over the past 90 days, divided by the average number of units available at fulfillment centers during that time. So that's a bunch of words, but let's actually look at what it means. So first, it means we look at the units sold or shipped within 90 days, and then it's divided by the average units available. So how much are you holding at FBA? And that equals your sell-through. So if you sold 9,000 units, but you were only keeping about 3,000 units at Amazon, then that would be a monthly turnover rate. And the number that you would see on your inventory dashboard next to sell-through would be a 3. However, if you sold 9,000 units and you held 9,000 units, that's a quarterly turnover, and the number you would see is 1. Most people are probably in the middle of these 2 numbers currently, but that gives you an idea of what that is. So if you want to improve your sell-through, you either need to sell more stuff or you need to hold less stuff. And that will help you to increase the sell-through, and it will help you to benefit by increasing your restock limits as well. Amazon, if they know that you can turn over that inventory and make them more money, they're more likely to grant you more space to be able to send more inventory in, because they know that that inventory, that's money for them. It's not space clogging. As a quick caveat, I do want to say there are times when Amazon, this is not the only factor for restock limits. There's Prime Day, there's holidays, there's the seasonality aspect, but there's also Amazon. Sometimes when they have lack of warehouse space, or they're having trouble at the warehouse, they'll all of a sudden pull a lever and kind of drop everyone's inventory. And we've seen that happen before. It's just merely Amazon not able to cope, and your business is suffering because of it. So the more Amazon is able to get their logistics and their warehousing in control, the more we should hopefully see those restock limits come up. They do say they're going to go away. I don't believe it yet. And there's a lot of people who are kind of not really believing it. We will see. But right now we have restock limits. So let's talk about utilization and how utilization is calculated so that you can maybe be able to control that side of things. So utilization, how much inventory you have that's counting against what you're able to send in. So you have FBA available inventory, obviously, all incoming shipments. This includes working shipments, in transit and receiving. So if you have a working shipment you're not using, deleting that will help to free up some space. Then you have unfulfillable inventory, right? That's inventory that Amazon's going to be sending back to you or disposing of, whatever you have set up. And then that basically equals your utilization quantity. However, that's what Amazon says. Amazon also says that pending removal orders and reserved inventory are not included in this calculation, but we have seen that that is not true, that removal orders and restock and reserved inventory are included in that utilization. And once that clears out, then you're able to use that space. So we found that that is one of the things that Amazon says, but is not true. So don't take everything that Amazon says as the gospel. Observe and also to ask reputable sources. So here's the relationship between sell-through and utilization. You can see average units available. That's basically your average utilization. So that's how that contributes to being part of that equation. All right. Now, Amazon has no sympathy for your stock outs. So if you do stock out, Amazon is not going to be giving you the benefit of the doubt and allowing you to maintain your restock limits. Your restock limits are going to suffer when you do stock out and when you stop taking on sales. However, stockouts seem to be inevitable at this time, just based on what's happening. So here's 3 levers that you can pull if you do stock out to avoid crashing your restock limits. How do you maintain the restock limits and avoid them completely crashing? First of all, switch to fulfilled by merchant. That's important because fulfilled by merchant sales, those sales count towards your restock limit. So even though Amazon is not fulfilling them, those are sales going through the Amazon platform. They count towards restock limits. Very important to know. So don't let Amazon be your only distribution center. Have a backup fulfillment center, and that will help your restock limits and help you to regain when you get your best sellers back in stock. Run excess inventory flash sales. So the beauty of storage type limits versus ASIN type limits is that we can market across our entire catalog and use excess inventory to increase velocity, and it will impact our entire catalog, right? So doing excess inventory flash sales can be a good tool in your tool belt. So this would mean that you would need to know what excess inventory you have. So that's where the Overstock reports come in very handy. And you can even do overstock. You can even do flash sales where you're fulfilling through FBM. That will help even more because your sales are going up, but you're not putting inventory into FBA, which really helps to further increase your sell-through. Then there's multi-channel fulfillment. I would suggest keeping abreast of some. We've made some announcements on, if you go to sostocks.com/restock, we've made some announcements about the multi-channel fulfillment program and some things that they have done in the past and may do in the future for boosting restock limits using the multi-channel fulfillment program. But essentially, you're borrowing sales velocity from your other channels. So what this is multi-channel fulfillment is letting Amazon fulfill for, let's say, your Shopify sales. You plug in Shopify and Amazon fulfills those. Do not do it with Walmart. Walmart will get into trouble. They may shut down your account if you do that, but you can do things like, like your Shopify sales, right? Multi-channel fulfillment through Shopify. That sales velocity, if it's running through Amazon, is going to contribute to your restock limits and to your sales velocity. You can also do this with manual fulfillment orders. So if you're selling, inventory to a mom and pop shop, you could potentially do a manual fulfillment to send, let's say 30 units of a product to a mom and pop shop. And those 30 units would help to contribute to your restock limits also. All right, so let's talk real quick about logistics flexibility. This is extremely important. I actually have a golden rule. This is, how do I avoid stocking out? How do I avoid all my stuff getting stuck in the ocean, on the ocean, or stuck waiting to check in at FBA? And that is, never let anyone have all your stuff. So you'll want to create a network which gives you a plan B and a plan C and options. Instead of putting everything on a container, right? You place an order for an entire container's worth of inventory. You put everything on that container and put it on the ocean, and then it never checks in until after Christmas, let's say. Nightmare of all nightmares. What you should be able to do, right, is to produce more than what you need for a container. Let's say you produce what you need for a container plus, let's say, a month and a half, 2 months worth of additional inventory. Then you have the supplier hold that inventory, and then if you need to, you can put it on a plane, and you only do that if you need to. If the ocean freight arrives on time, that's fine, then put that inventory on the next boat. But if it does not, then you have the ability to air freight it over. To save money, because I know it's expensive to produce more than what you need, to save money, what a supplier will often do is they won't charge you for the storage fees to hold the inventory for a couple of months. And they also may not charge you for anything until you actually ship the inventory out. They'll probably charge you your, say, 30% down for everything, but 70% they final payments, they would only potentially charge you for the stuff that actually leaves their warehouse. So that's something to do to help to mitigate those cash flow issues, right? The same thing would go for your LTL and your SPD. Treat LTL like your ocean freight, right? You send what you can, send it to Amazon, but if Amazon doesn't check it in, you have small parcel delivery to help send to Amazon to float. So you've got your 3PL acting like your supplier, holding excess inventory that you only send small parcel delivery if you're having trouble getting your LTL truck checked in. And of course, your FBM, you have your FBM as a backup as well, so that if all else fails, you're able to fulfill through your fulfillment center. All right, real quick, I want to explain a little bit. It's very, very important as we're talking about, Amazon not checking your stuff in. You probably have wondered why it takes so long for your inventory to get checked in. And I know that it's been a big contentious conversation that's happened over the last year or so, but there's actually a reason for this. There's a reason why it takes forever to check inventory in. And it all has to do with Amazon Freight and the trucking contracts that they have with the Amazon partners as well. Amazon Freight they bought a bunch of truck trailers. So these trailers here, Amazon owns hundreds of these trailers. And they have truckers, independent truckers, and other trucking companies take these trailers and fill them up with stuff to go to Amazon, send that stuff into Amazon, and then what happens instead of what we think is happening, which is backing it up to a loading dock and unloading it into the warehouse, what is actually happening, because Amazon owns these trailers, they have to drop the trailers. And then they pick up an empty one, and then they drive away, and they do it all over again. This is a great system when it actually works. But what's happening is Amazon's having so much difficulty in their warehouse with the warehouse staff, with getting those trailers unloaded, that the trailers are being dropped off and the trucks are driving away without empty trailers, and there's just trailers stacking up and not being emptied. And so your inventory could be sitting in a lot, not being unloaded for weeks and weeks and weeks, where you see it got delivered and then 5 weeks later, it's still not checked in. This is why. This is because these trucks and trucking companies have these relationships. Small parcel delivery is usually very reliable still, even with Amazon partner carrier. But I'm talking about LTL, right? LTL, Amazon Freight, and LTL, Amazon partner carrier. These are problems, and this could be that it's not always a problem. It could change, but right now that's what's happening, and that's why our stuff is not getting checked in. So you want to work with trucking companies that are not obligated to drop their trailers, that come and they basically dump their stuff right into the warehouse and drive away with their trailer. Those are the companies that are actually getting stuff checked in rather quickly. So if you work with an LTL trucking company, you need to make sure that it's a trucking company that's independent of this. So the best thing to do is actually to talk to your 3PLs and your freight forwarders. These guys are your best allies. And we're so used to creating our shipping order, sending it to them via email, and then them just fulfilling it. We treat them as order takers, and they should not be order takers. You need to use them. They have a lot of knowledge. I learned everything about the freight industry and trucking from our 3PL manager. And now this could change 3 months from now. 3 months from now, Amazon could sort this all out, and it could be a beautiful system because it's cheaper. Amazon is making all of this cheaper, but all of the headaches involved with getting your stuff checked in, you'd rather go with someone more expensive that'll actually get your stuff to arrive. So again, check with your 3PLs and your freight forwarders often what's working now, because things are changing so much. So you want to make sure that what I'm saying to you right now is still relevant when time comes to, send your stuff, let's say, in Q2. It could be that what I'm saying right now is not accurate, and that, Amazon's trucking system is perfectly fine and is great and is cheaper. So let's go with that option. But it's something to know that the people that are going to know this data are the people that are doing this on a daily basis. So no longer just send an email, and create your labels, get on the phone and talk to them, and it will be very valuable to you. So like I said, stop using Amazon Partner Carrier at this time. And one caveat is that this is not, once you are outside of Amazon's shipping network, you're not covered by Amazon's insurance. So if you have something that gets lost, Amazon's not going to necessarily reimburse you. Once they check that stuff in, yeah, then you go into Amazon's system, but it's something to keep in mind. So make sure that you have coverage otherwise, so that if your stuff gets lost, you're not, left holding the bag. And lastly, on this section, Amazon can't track your packages, so log your trailer numbers. This is a very valuable piece of information that I learned. Trailer numbers are what Amazon can use to actually find your stuff when it hasn't been checked in. So when you call up and you say, my shipment, where is it? And that's all the data, and you give them, your tracking data, they don't have X-ray vision to look at the trailer sitting out in their yard and say, oh, it must be in that one. But if you log your trailer number, they have the trailer numbers logged, they can actually locate your stuff. Most often it's just buried in the yard, but sometimes it's in a different location. It has happened in the past, and this is something I got from my 3PL, the owner of the 3PL that we use. His stuff was supposed to be in Nevada, and it was in California instead. So what happened is it just went to the wrong place. California opened it up. They said, this is for Nevada. This is not for us. They closed it, and they just left it there. And so it could have been there indefinitely, just lost for months and months and months. But what happened was they had the trailer number. So they said, here's the trailer number. The person located it, and then they were able to escalate it and get authorization to override and check that inventory in, check the Nevada inventory into the California warehouse. And then it was able to be distributed after that. So that was a way to unstick that. So getting your 3PLs, talking to your 3PLs and getting them to start logging trailer numbers. So if you have a problem, you have that information, that documentation to be able to track that. That concludes our presentation. I know it was a lot. It's like drinking from a fire hose. Hopefully some of this stuff is very, very actionable, especially with the gifts that I'm going to be sending you guys. Look for the email. And, let me know if you have any questions. You can type them into the chat. Just real quick about SoStocks, a little bit on how to put all of these systems, put a lot of these systems into place, especially the inventory tracking and calculations, putting these things into place and creating a system so that your 2022 is a lot more smooth running than maybe your previous years were. That's our whole mission, is not just more smooth running and avoiding stockouts, but also being more profitable. That's a huge mission of ours, is to be more profitable within your businesses. And so here's a little bit on SoStocks. It's the first fully customizable Amazon inventory management software built for sellers by sellers, which is often very overused. But what we mean about that is not just that it's built by myself because I'm a seller, but that we've worked with hundreds of sellers in the community, in various different parts of the community. So worked with a lot of influencers, worked with a lot of, a lot of sellers, 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers, communities, Titan Network, the $1 Million Sellers Group. A lot of these guys, aggregators even, we've worked directly with aggregators on the things that are needed to go into the software. And so that's what we mean by that. We also have factoring restock limits now in the forecast as well, which is something that is not being done anywhere else to date that I have been able to find. We have over 1,000 happy customers, free data migration. So if you want to put your, start using SoStock and you have a bunch of data that you need help with, we have this free data migration program that we're running. And then one-on-one onboarding. So you'll talk to a real person about your particular business and how to use the tool and how to structure your inventory best for your particular business. We have a question in the chat. How do you advise determining the right amount of inventory to inbound to FBA for a brand new product launch? I'm sure it varies by category, but curious on what you'd advise for a brand new product launch. Yeah, it does vary. I mean, 200 units is kind of been what Amazon has kind of said it was okay. whenever we did a product launch, whenever we've done a product launch, I'd say 500 units is kind of the base amount, but it really depends on how much space you have available. I would say no less than 200, maybe between 2 and 500. We always like to start with 1,000, but if you can get that 1,000 over to, a local warehouse, send in, between 2 and 500, that should at least get you started, and be willing to send stuff in small parcel delivery, not sending it with your whole LTL, palletized with the rest of your shipments, sending that stuff in small parcel delivery so that it can get checked in quickly. Make sure it's getting checked in quickly, because, as you're putting in these small amounts and you're doing this launch and you're scaling that up, it's going to be very difficult to keep that launch successful if you're stocking out. So you're going to have to spend not just on, in terms of your inventory and those launch costs, but also in terms of, the expediting of getting that inventory in. All right, so here's a couple of little features from SoStocked for anyone that is not using SoStocked right now. There is a customizable forecasts per SKU. Okay, sorry, there's another follow-up. Why 1,000 ideally seems high with no sales history? I mean, it depends on where you're getting your inventory from. So if you're getting your inventory from China, it's going to take a long time for you to get inventory back in, right? So the moment that you see that your inventory, if you've got 500 units, the moment that you see that your inventory, that your product is taking off, you place your order, and then you have to wait 60, 90 days to actually get more inventory. You don't have enough runway with 500 units total, right? But if you're sourcing, and you could potentially source in the US and then later on move out to China or some of these other countries afterwards, and you're just trying to prove the concept. Let's say, you're trying to sell water bottles, and you go to a promotional products business to get the water bottles, and then later on, once you prove the concept, you go outside to China. If your lead times are shorter, yeah, go ahead and try 200, 500, depending on your lead times. If you can turn around inventory in a week, and I do have a friend who sells certain products where they have a 1 week turnaround for producing inventory here in the United States, and then of course a little bit of shipping time. But if it takes 90 days, you need a lot more inventory, because what you'll do is you'll launch the product, and then you'll run out, and then you'll have to relaunch the product, and you'll get into this cycle of constantly trying to relaunch this product, all the while, people who are more aggressive and have more inventory than you are gaining market share. So that's why I say 1,000 units is a good place to start. That's always been our rule of thumb. And if you can't afford something like that, it becomes a little bit harder to launch products. Like I said, try looking at more expensive alternative ways of launching the product more locally, and then going out and increasing your profit margin outside of the US. That's kind of my 2 cents on that, and how we've always done it, and how the people that we know have always done it as well. One thing to note is, I forgot to mention this. So this is a new development. Amazon is starting to increase restock limits for new to Amazon ASINs. So if you add a brand new product to Amazon and then you create a shipping order, they are going to boost your restock limits. It's a way of getting more people to add more products into the catalog. They've noticed that probably it's slowed down for them since the restock limits, because people are just not able to launch new products. So that's something that was announced in the UK and EU marketplace, but most things are announced there and then move over into the US a couple of weeks afterwards. So I would not be surprised to see that now or very, very soon it is relevant for the entire Amazon ecosystem. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're looking to launch new products, that is we don't know how much. I would guess 200 units, a 200 unit boost per ASIN would probably be where Amazon would be sitting with those, but we don't know. They haven't told us, and we haven't had anyone be able to back up or see or test it out yet. So once we've got some people who've been able to test out that new feature, that new policy, then we'll be able to update you on that. As far as so-stock features, customizable forecasting, restock limits, being able to calculate your forecast using restock limits. So what, how much of each product should I be sending if I only have 500 units to send, for example, something that's in the software, as well as adjusted velocity, daily adjusted velocity calculations, trends, sales spikes, stock out calculations, sales growth, inventory timeline, orders and transfers that we talked about, the order and transfer tracker, the custom inventory dashboards, all of those reports that we talked about are able to be built out. And then POs and transfer creation. So clicking a button and saying, you've got your, you've got XYZ, these are the orders that you need for this particular supplier, it'll build out the PO for you. And then you can go through and actually email straight from the system. You can email that PO to your supplier to get your order started. All right, here's a couple of things that people said. I wanted to let you guys know we are doing a special promo where we're doing a free trial. This is the first time we've ever really done a free trial. We've given a couple of free trials. We did a Black Friday sale, but we are pushing a free trial right now. So if you want to try the software, definitely jump in. We've been charging before this point, so this is a new thing. Free trial is a new thing for us. We've never done it before in the 2.5 years that we've been live. So it's a new thing. So jump on it, get something set up within the next 30 days, a 30-day free trial, and get your 2022 off to a good start. Maybe it's your New Year's resolution to get your inventory more under control. All right, so forecasting is hands down the most accurate I've come across in years. This is all stuff that you can find on the Amazon App Store reviews. SoStock solved 99% of our problems. I'm getting rid of spreadsheets forever. We're going to we make so much more money now. Inventory went from hours to a few minutes, no joke. Truly listen to our needs. So again, like I said, sostocks.com, we're doing a free trial now. You can find it on the floater bar at the bottom of the website. So if you look at the floater bar on the bottom of the website, it says promo, 30-day free trial. Reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to connect with you guys. If you go to sostocks.com/connect, I'm there. My socials are there. If you do come and connect with me on social, send me a little message. That way I know who you are, where you came from, because I don't accept all messages, or I don't accept all connections unless I know who you are. So I'd love to connect with you. If you want a demo, sostocks.com /connect, you can find a demo there as well, a demo, and then any other webinars that I might do in the future. All right, I think that that's all of the questions we have. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. I know it was a lot, and look for the email with the freebies that I'm going to be sending out. All right, thanks guys, bye.